Right now, within a few steps of you, there's a can, maybe in the fridge. The wall of it is aluminium, about as thick as two sheets of paper. Inside, something is pushing outward in every direction at once, and it has been doing that every second for months. You have never once wondered whether it would hold. But for almost all of human history, a metal tube that could survive one explosion sat right at the edge of what people could build, and the men who tried it were regularly killed by the thing they'd made. The road from that to this runs through bamboo church bells barrel makers, a dead king, and a machine that started the Industrial Revolution completely by accident. I already dug it up, so let me tell you the story. For 1,000 years, the wall won completely. The wall around Constantinople was 2 meters thick on the outer ring and 6 on the inner one. Throwing rocks at that is throwing pebbles at a cliff. So a siege was never about breaking a wall. It was about waiting for the people inside to run out of food. Months, sometimes years, while armies grew old outside the city. Then, on the 3rd of August, 1460, a Scottish king walked over to show off his favorite gun. He was 29. It had a name, the Lion. Someone wrote it down a century later. The king was standing beside it when it burst, and a fragment broke his thigh in two. He was dead within minutes. Not killed by the enemy, killed by his own equipment. Which is the whole question. How do you forge a metal tube that survives an explosion from the inside, centuries before anybody understands what metal actually is? 300 years earlier, the thing that killed him wasn't metal at all. Gunpowder is 3 powders: charcoal, sulfur, and a white salt scraped off the walls of stables and cellars. That salt carries its own oxygen locked up inside it, and oxygen is the stuff in the air that every fire needs. So this is a fire that doesn't need air. It burns in a sealed tube, it burns underwater. That's the invention, not the tube, the powder. And it burns fast, but slower than its own bang, so it shoves instead of tearing. Get that wrong, and you haven't got a cannon, you've got a bomb. Originally, the barrel was hollow bamboo wrapped in paper and string lashed to a spear. A silk painting from the caves at Dunhuang around the year 950 shows a demon holding one. It burned through after a few shots. The oldest gun anyone has ever dug up is bronze from northeast China, made no later than 1288, 3.5 kilos, with not one word written on it. Now hold that date up against another one. Chinese metalworkers had been casting bronze since around 1700 BC. 25 centuries of pouring liquid metal into molds, and nobody poured a gun. So the metal was never the problem. A bell gets hit from the outside, so it needs to be stiff. A gun barrel gets shoved from the inside of the metal stretched into a ring all the way round, so it needs to be tough and it needs to give. Same trade, completely different problem. And there's a bigger hole in this. Guns came out of China and moved west, and the idea that Europe worked it out alone has been thrown out completely. But apparently nobody has ever found the road. No document, no route, no name. 38 years after that Chinese gun, a hand-copied English book shows a cannon shaped like a flower vase, and nobody can tell you how it got there. So how did they build a tube that could survive an explosion? They didn't. For 200 years, nobody did. Every early cannon was a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. The real question was never how they made them safe. It's why anyone was willing to stand next to one. And the first bronze guns weren't made by weaponsmiths. They were made by the people who cast church bells. Originally, those workshops made things that ring. They were also the only people alive with the furnaces, the casting pits, and the nerve to pour a big, hollow shape in one go. But they had to change the recipe completely. Bell metal runs about 1/5 tin because tin is what makes it sing, and tin is also what makes it shatter. Drop it under 1/10, push the copper up, and the barrel stretches instead of cracking. The thing that makes a bell beautiful is the thing that makes a cannon kill its own crew. Even then, there was the core. To get a hole down the middle, you hang a clay column inside the mold and pour around it. If that column drifts off center while the metal is going in, and it does, one wall comes out dangerously thin. From the outside, the gun looks perfect. Nobody finds out until it kills somebody. Bronze was brutally expensive. Completely out of reach if what you wanted was something bigger. That answer came from the people who made wine casks. Lay long iron bars side by side around a wooden pole, heat iron hoops white hot, hammer them down over the top, and let them cool. As they cool, they shrink and they squeeze. Originally, that was a barrel maker's trick for holding wooden staves together. Ironically, it's why the tube of every gun on Earth is still called a barrel. Cheap, and it's scaled. Malmeg, made in Burgundy in 1449, weighs 6.5 tons. But it failed two ways. Gas leaked out of the plug at the back, and the hoop stretched dangerously, then sprang and let the bars fly. Which brings us back to a field outside Roxburgh in 1460, and a king standing dangerously close. The lion was one of these. James II wasn't killed by England. He was killed by metal. Then the powder got better, and everything started breaking. Originally, it was mixed dry, so it separated in the cart on the way to the siege. In the early 1400s, somebody worked out that if you mix it wet-dry it and break it into grains, it works far better. The grains leave tiny gaps of air between them, so fire runs through the whole charge at once instead of crawling from back to front, which made every gun already in service dangerously weak. 1453, Constantinople. Mehmed's artillery fired something like 5,000 shots and burned around 55,000 pounds of powder at a wall that had held for 1,000 years. And here's the bit that usually gets told wrong. A lot of that wall was still standing at the end of it. What collapsed wasn't the wall. It was the idea that a tall wall keeps you safe. Europe stopped building upward completely. Walls came down low, got thick, got packed with earth behind them, corners pushed out into sharp angles. Height stopped being an advantage, and geometry took its place. But to make enough guns to change the world, you needed a cheaper metal, and the cheaper metal killed more of your own people. 1543, Buxted, in Sussex. A team casts the first English cannon made of iron in a single piece, led by a man called Ralph Hogg, working for the village priest. Yes, a priest running an arms business out of a country parish. Originally, iron was chosen purely because it was cheap. A third to a fifth of what bronze cost because the ore was under their feet, while copper had to be shipped in. Cheap enough to arm a navy completely. But poured iron is dangerously brittle. A bronze gun swells and tears so it warns you. An iron gun just comes apart into pieces with nothing beforehand. So the English did something nobody had done. They packed a new gun with 3 times the powder it was built for, dangerously overloaded on purpose. Put it in a pit, stood everybody behind a bank of earth and fired it. If it lived, they stamped it. Every craft before this one had been judged by how it looked. The cannon was the first thing humans ever made that had to be judged by how it fails. And right then, mathematics walked in. Verona, 1532. A gunner asks a mathematician what angle to point his gun at to throw the ball furthest. Niccolo Tartaglia knew nothing about war, so we worked it out with geometry. 45 degrees, halfway between the ground and the sky. 5 years later, he printed it, and numbers were aimed at the path of a moving object for the first time. One thing left. The hole. Around 1713, a Swiss engineer in France, Jean Maritz, turned it completely inside out. Stop pouring metal around a core, pour a solid block, then drill the hole out after. No core, no thin wall, nothing hidden inside. 200 years of invisible flaws gone. In 1774, John Wilkinson went further, spinning the gun against a cutting bar, braced at both ends, so the hole came out straight the whole way down. And at that exact moment, James Watt's steam engine was stuck. A steam engine boils water with coal and lets the steam shove things along. Watt's had been stuck for years because nobody could make a tube round enough to stop steam slipping past the moving plug inside it. Wilkinson adapted his gun drilling machine, and in April 1775, he handed Watt the tubes. The engine ran. The year after, Watt's business partner wrote that the 50-inch one at Tipton was out by no more than the thickness of an old shilling, a coin about as thin as a fingernail. Ironically, the Industrial Revolution came out of a gun barrel. What we got was the ability to trust metal completely, without ever thinking about it. What we lost was the memory of what it cost. And the maker. Those old guns had names. The Lion. Mons Meg. Carved, decorated, signed by the man who poured them. Now go back to the can. Nobody named it. Nobody put a lion on the side. Nobody stood 100 paces back the first time one was filled because somebody already did that several hundred years ago and didn't always walk away. It has a number stamped in the base, and that's all it gets. It is completely anonymous. Honestly, that's the part that stays with me. The luxury isn't the tube. It's never having had to think about it.